We so believe that the frame we're using to look at a problem is correct, when really, if we shifted it a little bit or expanded it or contracted it, we're going to end up seeing so many different opportunities. I mean, I use lots of examples. I mean, let me just give you one that I was thinking about this week as an example. So let's say you said, we need to figure out a cure for cancer. I mean, that sounds like a great idea, right? A cure for cancer.
Boy, do we ever.
Okay, but maybe we're not asking the right question, right? Maybe the question is, how do we prevent cancer, right? Preventing cancer is a totally different solution set to curing cancer. Or maybe we say, you know what? Cancer is actually a natural process as its cells do mutate. Maybe how do we live with cancer? Because treating cancer, we often assume we've got to kill every cancer cell. But if you assume I don't have to kill every cancer cell, I just have to kill enough so that somebody can live a nice life. Or then maybe that's the question. How do we make sure that people who have cancer live comfortably or live longer? The point is, each one of these questions unlocks very, very different solutions. And I'm a fan of the concept of framestorming. So framestorming before you brainstorm. Before you start falling in love with the solutions, you need to fall in love with the problem and really, really nail that problem. Make sure you're working on the right thing before you even start attempting to looking at solutions.
Professor, I need to say something to you right now.
Okay.
Before I say it, I need to say two things about what I'm going to say, though.
Okay.
A, I really want you to hear this in the way that I mean it. And B,
okay.
I might be the most happily married man you know. Okay. So with those two things said, man, do I want to kiss you right now.
I love you.
No, it's so great what you're saying, because I've tried to teach myself to think about thinking. I learned at about 18 that we could really think about thinking, not just have thoughts. And so this framing thing is something, and I didn't use framing as a language to describe it when I was 18, but this framing idea that you're on, I think, is so freaking powerful. I find myself a lot in life saying to people, I'm not sure if we're having the right conversation.
Right. And this is the problem, because we need to really teach people to do this. We give people problems which, the sort of typical, what's the sum of 5 plus 5, right? And you assume it's the right question. But if you turned it around and said, what two number, and then, there's one right answer. Okay, we got that. Check the box. But what if you said what two numbers add up to 10, right? And then now how many answers are there to that? An infinite number of solutions. And in fact, the most interesting piece of this is not the question, what two numbers add up to 10? It's that actually that's the way life really works. In life, we are given problems like that. Okay, figure out how to sell this product. Okay, nobody's going to tell you the two things you have to do to get to sell it. They're just telling you, here's the goal, or here's a problem, climate change, or curing cancer, whatever. We're giving you the goal. And then we're not telling you what you have to do. And so this is why so many people start struggling when they get into the workforce, because they've only been given problems with one right answer. And here is the problem here.
Well, and that's what I love about what you're doing that I think is so powerful as an educator. If I'm an educator and I take a mental construct, that is to say, my frame is, my job is to impart knowledge, which on its face sounds smart and reasonable and logical and so forth. But if you say, okay, my job is to also teach people how to think about thinking.
Yeah. Well, this is the issue, though, is that in schools, one of the biggest challenges they have is that they need to measure whether they've taught people things. And it's
right. You measure my knowledge with a test, right?
It's super easy to give a test that has a right answer because it's super easy to grade that test. But if I gave you an open-ended problem without a right answer, how do I evaluate it? And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to forget who it's from, so you can go check it out and put it in your show notes.
Maybe I can Google it as you're talking.
Okay, you can Google it. It's often attributed to Einstein, but I believe it's not. And the quote is, not all things that count can be counted, and not all things that can be counted count.
Yeah,
and
it's so great.
It's such an important thing to keep in mind, that we need to think about those things that really count, that are really really, really are hard to measure.
Yeah, I love that. So if you go back to framestorming, which I love so much, if I'm, an executive or an entrepreneur, or I'm a researcher trying to cure cancer, whatever kind of project me and the team I'm on is working on, and we now, we're up against something, we say, hey, we need to brainstorm about this. How much framestorming should I do as a percent? Let's say, and I'm going to allot a certain amount of time. As a percentage of the time that you go to sort of work on this, what percentage should be framestorming versus brainstorming?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think you should give yourself not only a significant period of time to really immerse yourself in the problem, but also even give yourself a goal of like, we're going to come up with 20, 30, 40 different questions that we might want to ask.
Right.
And so what I do with my students is when they get problems for like a term project, I will give them a very open-ended problem. It might be sleep or memory or death. And each team has to framestorm and come up with as many, types of problems they might want to tackle in that space.
The other one I've been dying to ask you about is the languaging around the framing. So if we go back to your comment about cancer, I'm a student of languaging. So I don't mean like studying English, but studying the way we use language to describe things. So for example, on cancer, you hear a lot about how we need to fight cancer. And if you get diagnosed with cancer, doctors will even say to you, okay, well, here's our program for how we're going to help fight your cancer. And I don't know. I don't know shit about cancer or doctoring, but it's an interesting framing. And
yes, and in fact, that's really important. The metaphors we use dramatically shape the way we see the problem, right? I mean, you can take anything in our life and come up with lots of different metaphors that allows you. That's a great way. So let me just sort of say yes, and using metaphor is one of the most powerful ways to unlock different frames for addressing a problem.
Yeah, and so look, I don't know, is fight the right frame for cancer?
It may not be.
My friend, the legendary designer, John Bielenberg, his philosophy, he calls it thinking wrong. And what he says is how you start to think wrong is you pick whatever the topic that you're working on is, and you say, okay, what would most reasonable, smart people say, do, or think about this topic? Boom, fight cancer. And he says, okay, what's the opposite of that?
Right. What if I love cancer? What would happen there?